The system and the setting. There is a place in America where silence is not a side effect. It is the point, hidden in the high desert of southern Colorado, just outside the small town of Florence, stands a fortress designed with a single purpose: permanent separation. From a distance, it looks like a concrete mirage rising from dust and razor wire. Up close, it feels less like a prison and more like an engineered void. This is ADX Florence, the Administrative Maximum Facility, often called the most secure prison in the United States. It did not emerge by accident. In the 1980s, after a series of violent incidents inside federal prisons shook confidence in the Bureau of Prisons, officials began searching for a solution. There were inmates they could not control, individuals whose reputations carried influence far beyond the walls of ordinary institutions. Some directed criminal enterprises from inside. Others were considered too dangerous to house anywhere else. The federal system needed a place built not for rehabilitation or reintegration, but for containment at the highest possible level. So in 1994, ADX Florence opened its doors. Its location was strategic. Isolated by geography, surrounded by miles of open land, backed by mountain ranges that feel both majestic and indifferent. Escape here would mean crossing empty terrain under an unblinking sky. But the real barrier is not the desert. It is the design. ADX Florence was constructed from the ground up to eliminate unpredictability. Every hallway angle, every door mechanism, every sight line was calculated. Movement is minimized. Contact is restricted. Human interaction is rationed. This is the so-called Alcatraz of the Rockies. Inside its reinforced concrete walls, some of the most notorious federal inmates in modern history have served time, including convicted terrorists, organized crime figures, and individuals responsible for large-scale acts of violence. But beyond the headlines, beyond the names that once dominated front pages, the facility represents something larger. It is the ultimate expression of the American Supermax philosophy. If someone cannot be managed, they can be isolated. The prison forms part of a larger federal correctional complex in Florence, Colorado, but ADX is different from its neighboring institutions. It houses inmates in near-total solitary confinement. Officially, this level of control is called administrative maximum security. Unofficially, it is a social vacuum. Each cell is a self-contained world. Thick concrete walls, a steel door with a narrow slot, a bed, desk, and stool molded from poured concrete, a shower that can be remotely controlled, a window only 4 inches wide, positioned so inmates can see the sky but not the horizon. Orientation itself is limited. The philosophy behind ADX Florence is built on one core assumption: communication equals power. If you remove the ability to communicate, you reduce influence. If you eliminate contact, you prevent coordination. If you restrict movement, you prevent chaos. It is control distilled to its purest form. Supporters argue facility protects staff and other inmates across the country by separating those considered most dangerous. They believe ADX prevents violence elsewhere in the federal system. Critics argue the cost is measured in something less visible human psychology, but the structure remains. In the decades since its opening, ADX Florence has become synonymous with permanence. Many inmates sent here arrive after violating rules in other prisons or being deemed too influential behind bars. Some spend years in isolation. Others may remain for decades. Transfer out is possible, but it requires compliance, time, and evaluation through a step-down program designed to test behavior. From the outside, it appears orderly. Clean lines, structured systems, no chaos spilling beyond the perimeter. But what makes ADX Florence remarkable is not what you see. It is what you do not hear. No yard chatter echoing through corridors. No communal dining hall noise. No crowd movement. Just doors, concrete, and controlled silence. This prison was not designed to rehabilitate the average offender. It was designed to manage the exceptions, the outliers who could not be placed anywhere else. It is the endpoint of the federal correctional spectrum. And yet behind every reinforced door, there is still a person. That is where the real story begins. Not in the architecture, not in the policies, but in the lived experience of isolation. Because once the door closes, The design stops being theoretical. It becomes personal. And inside ADX Florence, personal space is measured in concrete walls and hours that do not move. Life inside the walls. The door shuts with a hydraulic finality. There's no dramatic slam. Just mechanical seal, controlled, deliberate, absolute. An inmate at ADX Florence will spend approximately 23 hours a day inside a single cell. That hour outside is not freedom. It is recreation in a solitary enclosure, sometimes described as a dog run, surrounded by high walls and open only to the sky. There is no shared yard, no casual interaction. Movement is choreographed by correctional officers and monitored by cameras that never blink. The day begins early. Meals arrive through a slot in the steel door. Breakfast, lunch, dinner pass silently. No trays exchanged by hand. No communal tables. If an inmate is considered high risk, even utensils may be limited. Every action is predictable. Every routine repeated. Inside the cell, the environment rarely changes. The bed is fixed. The desk is fixed. The light can be controlled. But darkness does not bring privacy. Surveillance continues regardless of the hour. Conversations with staff are brief and transactional. Eye contact is fleeting. Sound behaves differently in a place like this. There is no layered noise of a typical prison population. Instead, there are isolated echoes, the distant hum of ventilation, the mechanical click of locks, an occasional voice carried down a corridor. For many, the most dominant sound becomes their own breathing. Mail is screened. Phone calls are rare and monitored. Visits, when permitted, occur behind thick glass. Physical contact is non-existent. Even movement to a different area of the facility requires restraints and multiple officers. Procedures are not suggestions. They are choreography designed to prevent unpredictability. Some inmates enter ADX directly after federal sentencing. Others arrive after disciplinary problems in lower security prisons. The step-down program offers a path toward reduced restrictions, but is gradual and contingent on strict compliance. Months can pass before any noticeable change in conditions. Years before transfer becomes realistic. The psychological weight of routine becomes its own presence. Time at ADX Florence does not pass in milestones. It passes in increments. Meal to meal, count to count, light to dark. Without shared experiences, without casual conversation, days blur. Weeks flatten. Memory becomes less anchored to events and more to repetition. There have been documented legal challenges over the years questioning prolonged solitary confinement and its impact. Lawsuits have alleged that extended isolation can worsen mental health conditions. In response, the Bureau of Prisons has implemented screening procedures and mental health services within the facility. Evaluations occur. Treatment is offered. But therapy conducted through steel and reinforced glass carries its own limitations. Former inmates have described the experience as existing in a world stripped of essentials. No crowds, no social politics in the traditional sense. Yet hierarchy still exists, not through visible power displays, but through reputation and classification. The label that places someone in ADX follows them inside, and still, routine dominates everything. Recreation hour may involve pacing in a confined outdoor space. Some inmates exercise alone in their cells, creating structure where none is provided. Others read extensively, books becoming both escape and anchor. Education programs exist in limited formats, delivered under strict conditions. But the absence of spontaneous interaction changes how the mind processes reality. In ordinary environments, conversations interrupt thoughts. In ADX, thoughts can stretch uninterrupted for hours. Reflection can deepen or distort. The mind fills silence with memory, with regret, with imagined futures that may never materialize. Correctional officers operate under their own discipline. Professional distance is mandatory. The structure protects them as much as it restricts inmates. Every procedure is layered with redundancy. Doors do not open without confirmation. Movement does not occur without documentation. It is a system built to minimize risk at every stage. Yet risk in this environment is rarely physical. It is psychological. The longer isolation continues, the more the absence of social feedback reshapes perception. Small changes feel amplified. Minor interactions carry weight. A brief exchange during medical rounds can linger in memory far longer than expected. In a facility designed to eliminate chaos, the greatest unpredictability lies within the human mind. And that is the tension at the heart of ADX Florence. Because while the architecture controls movement, it cannot fully control thought. And thought, when left alone long enough, becomes its own terrain. The psychological reality and final truth. Isolation is not loud. It does not announce itself with alarms or visible damage. It works slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. At ADX Florence, the most profound effects are rarely captured in official reports. They unfold in private, in the space between memory and silence. Human beings evolved in groups. Conversation regulates emotion. Eye contact grounds perception. Shared experience creates context. Remove those elements for extended periods, and the mind begins searching for substitutes. Some inmates adapt by building rigid personal routines. Wake at the same minute. Exercise at the same count. Read at the same hour. Structure becomes survival. Others immerse themselves in faith, in study, in long internal dialogues meant to keep cognition sharp. Letters, when allowed, become lifelines measured in paragraphs. But not everyone adjusts the same way. Psychologists have long studied the effects of prolonged solitary confinement. Symptoms can include anxiety, depression, hypersensitivity to stimuli, difficulty concentrating, and altered sleep patterns. In extreme cases, perception itself can feel unstable. The Bureau of Prisons maintains that ADX includes mental health monitoring and pathways for those with serious conditions. Yet critics argue that no amount of oversight can fully offset years of near-total isolation. The truth likely exists somewhere between policy and lived experience. For some inmates, ADX represents a necessary boundary, a response to behavior that could not be managed elsewhere. For others, it becomes a psychological crucible, testing endurance in ways not immediately visible. The absence of social mirrors forces confrontation with the self. There is no audience, no reputation to perform for, no crowd to influence, just time. And time in isolation behaves differently. Without external markers, birthdays celebrated, seasons felt through shared activity, the internal world expands. Memories sharpen or distort. Regret can intensify. So can rationalization. In a place designed to prevent influence, the only territory left to control is the mind. Power at ADX Florence is structural. It exists in policies, schedules, architecture. Inmates cannot negotiate its boundaries. They can only navigate within them. Compliance may lead to incremental privilege. Resistance often leads nowhere. The system does not argue. It absorbs. And yet, even here, humanity persists in subtle ways. A correctional officer addressing someone by name. A book that shifts perspective. A letter that arrives after months of waiting. Small moments carry disproportionate weight because they break monotony. They remind both sides of the door that this is not just a facility. It is a collection of individual lives suspended in a controlled environment. The darkest reality of ADX Florence is not dramatic. It is ordinary. It is a slow normalization of extreme isolation. Over time, what once felt unbearable can begin to feel routine, and routine can feel permanent. That permanence is what defines a facility. Not necessarily the length of a sentence, but the psychological weight of confinement without community. Supporters argue that ADX Florence protects the broader prison system and, by extension, the public. Critics question whether long-term isolation reshapes people in ways that make eventual reintegration more difficult. The debate continues in courtrooms, academic journals, and policy discussions. But inside the walls, debate fades. There's only the daily rhythm of doors and silence. ADX Florence stands as a monument to control, the farthest point on the spectrum of incarceration in the United States. It asks a question without speaking aloud. What is the limit of separation a human mind can endure? The answer is not uniform. For some, it is resilience carved from routine. For others, it is erosion measured in quiet increments. The architecture remains unchanged either way. And when the sun sets over the Colorado desert, casting long shadows across reinforced concrete, the prison does not shift. The mountains do not move. The doors remain closed. Inside, time continues its slow, methodical march unseen, unheard, but deeply felt, in a place designed to break connection. The final battle is not against the walls. It is against the silence that never leaves.